Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today we've got Elad Barak. He is the CEO of Voyager. Elad, thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell the audience that don't know with the Talking Hedge what Voyager is, what you're doing there, and what you guys got going on.
Yeah, sure. So Voyager is a company that's developing a medical product that can very accurately and precisely dispense liquids, concentrates. And we believe that the first market for our product is cannabis, as we see a big opportunity there to bring a product that allows consumers to have cannabis oil, whether it's sublingual or water drops to add to their beverages in a very accurate and safe way. And afterwards, we will take this also to the medical field.
So a lot of people are familiar with like a tabletop dispenser or something that can create a butter or oil or tincture, definitely familiar with vape pens. So just to elaborate, because this is a very unique product and you don't have a lot of competitors like you've mentioned. So this is a portable device that you can hover over water or coffee or a pre-roll if you want to infuse that. Am I understanding all of the applications?
I think a lot of people, well, we get a lot of times the mistake is this is a vape. It's absolutely not a vape. This is for people that don't want to vape and smoke. Like myself, I vape because it's kind of one of my only options in a way. But the most of the people don't want to vape and smoke. So what we have here is the same cannabis oil you can put inside our device. But now instead of taking a syringe and trying to guess if you're taking the amount you want, you just say, I want 5 milligrams. You press a button and you get those 5 milligrams. You can use it sublingually. You can put it in your food. It's kind of up to you. If you put inside, instead of regular cannabis oil, you put cannabis oil that was already emulsified into water, then now you can add it into a beverage. And instead of going and buying a beverage in the dispensary that maybe tells you it's going to be sparkling with a specific flavor and 5 milligrams, and maybe you want 4 milligrams and you also want it with your coffee, not a sparkling beverage, then you take your coffee, you take your device, you press 4 milligrams and that's it, you're done. So it's just more convenient. I will just close my background just for a moment. And then this is our pod and dispenser. It's really small. This is my broken phone, but it's very small size. You just connect them together. You have a few buttons and you get a very accurate drop.
So the base of that's where you have your special blend, is that right? And the top unit is the atomizer or the battery?
So we call the top unit the dispenser, and it's a one-time purchase. It's only $50. We're keeping it as low cost as we can. We're actually almost financing it from that perspective. And then we make money, essentially our profit is from the recurring sales and purchases of the pods. So those pods, we can sell our own brand, but you're also selling them empty to other cannabis brands that want to join our ecosystem, and they can fill it and also put it in the legal dispensaries. And then consumers, they just go and they purchase their favorite pod, whether it's going to be with THC or with CBD, indica, sativa, whatever it is for you, but you can now replace them. And we designed it very nicely that if you have a dispenser, you can replace the pods as many times as you want. So if you put your pod in a curing machine, you have one use of it, and then you throw it away. With us, it's kind of different. Each pod can contain, according to the regulator, up to 1,000 milligrams. So let's say, for example, you take a pod with 400 milligrams, and you want to use it. You don't have to use all of it until you take it out. You can connect it, use 5 milligrams, disconnect it from the dispenser, put another pod, maybe this time with CBD instead of THC, use that one a bit, and then go back to the THC. So they're interchangeable. We've developed them in a way that you can just simply connect and disconnect them. There's no moving parts that you need to. It's just with a magnet, it clicks. And now you have this variety of pods. So you can really personalize not only the amount, but also which type of cannabis you're using each time.
So you're working with, like in the U.S. where it's not federally legal, like where you're at in Canada, you'd have to work with individual states, right? Either a producer or processor to get that into a retail shop, and you'd have to basically work at a multi-state operator. Would I be able to buy that unit and fill it with a tanker, like the syringe, and use it for myself and not wait for a producer processor to white label that?
So unfortunately, that's not how we're gonna have it. As I mentioned, we make actually our money from selling the pods. If you're going to refill your pod, that's our business in the end of the day. And also, in order to make sure that the pod is accurate, we need to fill it. We have a proprietary pump that we developed inside the pod, so it's an integrated dispensing mechanism. And for it to work, we need to fill it perfectly, meaning we need to make sure that there's no bubbles and things like that. So that's something that we can do on the factory level. And then our pods are very safe from a consumer perspective. So we need to make them child-proof. We want to make them dummy-proof. There's no way for you to take the cannabis out, or any liquid in that case from the pod out, without the dispenser. And to that matter, there's no way for you to put it in after we fill it, right? Like, we close it and that's it. It's one-time close and it can't open again. So there's no chance you can open it and take the liquid out. So that kind of makes that difficult and requires a different design for something else.
Interesting. So what about I'm going to get to the technology behind this hardware. You've got some software and some interesting data that you're able to pull from that. And so, taking a step back, we had met originally from the investor hot seat, and on the same panel was a company pitching called the O Blend, and they have a tabletop unit, and it's really big and it's got its own things. But what I did like about it was the ability to, like, if I was over at somebody's house who had the O Blend and I had some coffee and I said, oh, I really like the effect, I want to emulate that, basically copy it, you could do that from their software. Do you have something similar to where if I were to experience it with you and want to copy that, is that an option?
I mean, we're doing something that's a bit different, so it's difficult to compare, and I'll just explain the difference. I think what O-Blend is doing is they're trying to personalize upstream. So they're saying, we're going to take this device, put it in a dispensary or in an LP, assuming that LPs are going to want to do individual products for people and not, and do the QA for that, or dispensaries will be able to have open cartridges. But they're saying, we're going to do a specific blend to you. I think that's not where the market is. I think the market is more about being able to dispense it accurately. So once you got their product, and essentially maybe you can put their product even in our pods, now if you want to get 1 milligram or 2 milligrams and know what you're doing and track that, that's where we come into place with your actual consumption. They just put it in a bottle, right? So it's a bit different from that perspective. We do something really different. We're personalizing downstream, they're personalizing upstream. So I just think we're not competing with them from that perspective. I know it sounds similar, but they're just making a blend which has its own right as a product, and we're doing something completely different. We're delivering it. For your question, we have with our dispenser and pod the ability for you to memorize what you're doing. So for example, if you buy a pod with a specific strain you like and you always use 5 milligrams in that, the dispenser will learn that and remember that. So if you connect another pod with the same kind of characteristics, it's going to do the same. But there's not a lot to copy, I think, but something maybe to think about and add in the future, right? Yeah.
So you've got some machine learning involved with that, and it's kind of learning with you.
It's I don't want to exaggerate and say that is the machine learning. It's just a very simple, thing. If I know that you use it every time 5 milligrams, I can continue doing that, right? Machine learning maybe, but in minimal scale, right? I won't give myself a tap on the shoulder or something that big.
Well, so, going back to 2019, accurate dosing was one of the top investment drivers. There's a lot of people that want to know what effects they're going to have every single time. Very similar to alcohol, whether you have a tequila or a wine or a beer, they have different effects, but you consistently know what to expect. So how is this accurate dosing different than some other people claiming the same thing, and how exactly does it work?
Yeah, I think when people started talking about accurate dosing, everybody was focused on vapes. And I think a lot of the times in the cannabis industry, we see it in different things with the cannabis industry. We understand there's a challenge, and one company comes with one solution, and then you see a herd, and everybody's following, and nobody's kind of like stopping to think, is that the only thing? And okay, well, Dosist came and said, we had an accurate vape, and they do a time control in it, which is okay. It's what we call an engineering open loop. So essentially, they're measuring how much time you're puffing, and that's how they control your dose. And then a bunch of other companies have followed, and there's a few now. But nobody stopped to say, what about the liquids? And if you're assuming that a syringe is accurate, that's great. But I have a lot of researches that I'm looking up, and like even when you teach nurses how to do it, they're still not that accurate with a syringe. And there's graphs that like show up to 50% misdosing with syringe. So essentially, we're missing that part with the liquids. We're just focusing on the vape. And then another thing that one of the judges asked us, which I think is a fair point, is what happens if the oil itself is not accurate? And that's a different challenge, and we acknowledge that. But you can't solve the problem without solving both challenges, right? You need to, one, know what you're manufacturing, but then what you're actually dosing. And today, people are not dosing correctly. They don't know what they're consuming. And you have a lot of these mistakes, and you have people saying, oh, I consumed too much oil, I didn't feel good, I fell asleep for too long, all these stories. So we just took a different approach and said there's more places to be accurate on, not only the vapes. And essentially, I have to say, I think for us, our accuracy is much higher, because with vapes, it really depends also on how people are drawing it. Is the oil around the heating pump exactly or not? There's a lot in thermodynamics that is very difficult for us to control, that I'm not sure an open loop vape can do. Where for us, and we're also an open loop, meaning we don't measure how much liquid is going out, but our mechanism, our proprietary pump is very accurate. And we know that from testing. But you're consuming all of it. It's all going for you. If you consume 2 milligrams of oil, you're putting it sublingual. I know that if I know that I give you exactly 2 milligrams and I'm accurate at plus minus 2%, that's what you got. So this is a real accurate dose that you're getting right now, which was not available before that.
Yeah, I guess it is a really good question and an interesting point, because, you know, one blue dream might be different than the next. And so depending on what the product says, for example, you might have CBN from degradation or whatnot, you know, so definitely is interesting. So with the advancement with technology, is that going to be something that you're able to pick up? Is different cultivars or chemovars, or what is the future of that technology, and what are you able to actually extract and utilize?
So again, because we're not touching the plant, we're just doing the spec. What we do is every time a new client wants to work with us, we need to just adjust. We need to learn their liquid one time. So when they finish manufacturing it, we need to understand how viscous it is. And just to explain what that means very high level is, if you take a jar of honey and you put it upside down, it's going to go really slowly. Even though honey is a liquid, it doesn't just drop like water, right? So different oils and liquids will have different viscosity, and we need to adjust for that so we can really measure our accuracy. And then a few other things about the liquid. We kind of need to build that in, make sure how do we dispense 1 milligram of that. So do you have 18 milligrams per milliliter or 23 milligrams per milliliter? Kind of need to do a small experiment, make sure that we're adjusting our pod, and then we just type it on. So all of our pods are smart pods, meaning they have a chip that the dispenser can read. And we kind of give our dispensers instructions there. So now the minute you did the pod, you connect it to the dispenser, and right away it knows how to dispense 1 milligram. So for us in Voyager, it's more about taking a liquid and knowing how to dispense it very accurately. But we don't do the extraction at all. We don't have a license, and we don't want to have a license. We want to keep ourselves light from that perspective. So we can take our model once we prove it in Canada and copy it to each state in the United States, as you mentioned before, and in Europe, and just expand it. It's kind of like a franchisee from that perspective.
Obviously, right now with COVID and the issues, edibles are really popular. The big concern people had was overdosing. So this product seems like a really good idea to get novice people, or just even regular consumers who want something that's going to be consistent. So is this something that you designed based on knowing that edibles were something that people weren't able to accurately either dose or ingest themselves? Kind of what brought about it, and where do you see this product fitting in the current COVID environment with edibles having the sales that they are?
Yeah, and I think sometimes our product really fits a lot of wide, variety of options, and everybody tells you like you need to know and focus, and we do have our focus, but the fact is, to your question, it really can solve a lot of issues. I think how we got to this was very interesting. My partner and I, we wanted to create a cannabis beverage, and we thought a lot of cannabis companies are trying to do it in a very complicated way, invest a lot of money. And we're like, sure, we can do it cheaper. And we were working on that for a while, till one day we had this aha moment. We like to call it, we put our MBA hats on. And we were thinking, well, if you're adding cannabis at the last stage to the beverage, why are you adding it at all? Why? There's no reason. As the consumer, I don't get value from you deciding that I want to drink a Coca-Cola. You wanted to make it sparkling for me. And just as an experience from Friday, it was Jewish Rosh Hashanah. I went to friends. I was responsible for wine. And I decided to bring some cannabis beverages as well. They were all sparkling in the store. There was not one not sparkling, and I don't drink any like carbonated drinks.
Hmm.
But we kind of had this moment of like, why do you need to decide all of that to the consumer? Why do you need to tell you you want 2 milligrams or 5 milligrams when maybe I want something else? And everybody you ask, all the CEOs of the cannabis companies will tell you it's a very personal product. 5 milligrams for me, maybe 3 milligrams for you, right? And we thought, why not sell just cannabis that's infused in water as drops and let you mix it? And we'll do it in really fancy files and sell to you, we'll cork them. And it took us a bit more time to understand, like, no, we need to be even more adaptable. We need to give you a dispenser. And then we kind of started to go on with that, and we figured out, like, we're actually solving a big problem here, because most of the consumers with edible, they're like, consumers don't want to smoke and vape, the majority of the people. And then they all have these stories of they use the brownie and they felt really bad. They don't know how to control the dose. It doesn't work for them. And also you're asking them to do two changes. Maybe somebody doesn't want to eat a brownie. Maybe they don't eat sugar. A lot of us don't eat those things anymore. I live a fairly healthy life from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it just answered all of those challenges. We really developed a product that we thought will be convenient for a lot of people to consume. I always like to say this, I developed something that I think my mother will feel comfortable taking out of her purse and adding some cannabis to her beverage in a coffee place and not feeling uncomfortable. Not that she uses cannabis, but I think this will make her feel comfortable to do it, right? But I have to say, when I go to talk with bud tenders, and I do that quite oftenly, I like to go to the dispensaries. The majority of them likes them because they buy the drops. They don't buy the beverages because they're too expensive for them. And they're like, wow, I need this. And I like to take 40 milligrams of CBD. Somebody told me they had to count 80 drops of CBD, dropper. I'm like, really? So the reactions we're getting from heavy users are as interesting, right? So I do see this going to both sides of the market.
Speaking of cannabis cafes, it's not really a thing in the States, wide scale. But do you see this as being something that people would have at the table to use and consume, or would this be something behind the bar at like a barista would use? I guess I'm wondering about the industrial application available with this product.
So it's really interesting because I have a vision to what you can do with this when we get to that stage where we have cafes, right? But I always thought, like, I don't really need a cafe, to be honest. That's it. I don't need it. I can go right now with you and sit here in my favorite coffee place, take my pot and dispenser, open my coffee, add my amount of milligrams of THC, ask you how much you want to offer you, add to you. And, in these COVID days when nobody wants to pass a joint anymore, and honestly, a week ago, somebody passed the joint and asked if it comes with COVID, right? Like, we're not in those days anymore. So it's really easy to share, to your question before. And we close our cups, and that's it. We can drink our coffee with cannabis. I don't need to go to a special place anymore. But having said that, and I do think that coffee, cafes for cannabis will be a thing, I can definitely see our solution. Like, I can take a dispenser and then incorporate it within a nice I need to find the word in English. That's a difficult one. But like a cap, right? And maybe having 1 or 2 or 3 pods and allowing a bartender to just do whatever beverage they want and come and add very quickly a few drops of whatever cannabis, or maybe mixing cannabis. I think in that case, you're kind of competing against maybe a bit O-blend, but again, we also do the dispensing accurately for glasses. So that can be different, right? I can literally dispense the 1 milligram.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do see it going there, and there's a lot of like these nice cafes here in Toronto that have these really small, slick kind of taps for their coffee right now. And they can see us like integrating that in it because our device is fairly small.
I think once cafes become a thing, it's going to revolutionize the industry. But I think that COVID has as well. It's definitely sped up the implementation of delivery. It's not legal in Washington state, but that'll get fast-tracked as cafes kind of get sidetracked. What does your crystal ball prediction say for the industry as a whole? Where do you see it going the remainder of the year, or even into 2021?
That's a tough one where the industry is going, but I think we're going to continue seeing a bunch of the big guys, obviously, that There's going to be a few other failures there probably. But I do think with the dispensaries, it's obvious we don't have enough, right? It's nice to see that there's more and more online purchasing after COVID. And we've been tracking that because we believe that our product is really good for being sold online. It's very thin. It can go in an envelope. It doesn't weigh much. So we've been seeing an increase in online. I think that's going to stay, and that's a big change in Canada, right? People in the beginning, they didn't want to put their credit card. So I think we're going to continue seeing that. But hand in hand, we're going to see an increase in store, which is very important. Again, something that I was kind of like not a big believer, but it's been proven that I was wrong about that, is the more stores you have, the more consumers. And it's visible, and you need it. Like when you think about all the LCBOs you have here, which are our alcohol stores, those are the things that are needed. And then the other thing that I would say, and this is my, more aligned with what Voyager is doing, I think there's a big challenge in the industry where, related to what I said before about somebody saying the solution and everybody running after them. I don't think that cannabis beverages, as they are going to stay the end, like the solution for cannabis beverages. I think ready to drink are a solution that comes after you know what consumers want. I think the industry needs to start with a broad option. So it doesn't have to be our dispenser, even though I think that's going to be a big thing. But there's companies that are selling beverage drops that you can add to your beverage. That's what you need to start with. Let people do their beverage by themselves, give them the control, and maybe we learn that people love, I don't know, cannabis in their sports drink, and that's what we need to do as a ready to drink. But as it is today, like we invented all these drinks without really knowing what consumers want, right? Like nobody knows. So I really think that's a mistake. That's not how to sell cannabis. I always say cannabis is not necessarily comparable to alcohol in the way that it's not essentially compared to coffee, but you won't sell a coffee in a can. You will sell it in beans. And I think that cannabis needs to be sold as a concentrate and not as a ready to drink. So that is my biggest prediction. Probably take the industry more than 2020 to figure it out, but I hope we prove everybody wrong on it.
It is interesting that ready-to-go drinks are so expensive, around $20 US that I've seen for a lemonade. That's really a seasonal drink in the summer, whereas coffee in the Northwest, we drink a lot of coffee, and the only ready-to-go coffee that I've seen is in Portland, and they're always sold out. And I think there's only one company remaining where the other companies switched. They either are out of business or they had to switch entirely because coffee, for whatever reason, is maybe a value purchase. They're not going to spend, well, I mean, they spend $8 at Starbucks every day, but they won't do that for cannabis at 20. Obviously that's expensive. So I'm just curious if we can get it down to 10 to 15 cents per milligram at 100 milligram limits, if that will improve the volume.
I'm a big believer it will, right? Because at the end of the day, I'll give you an example from the market here. There is a company that is selling a powder that you can mix with any beverage. You can buy 10 milligrams for $7. Or you can buy 2 tea bags, each one with 5 milligrams for $12. I'm fairly sure I'm accurate on the prices. So there's $5 difference for the same amount of milligrams that go into your beverage. Just in the expensive one, you're told that it's a tea, and you're told that it's 5 milligrams in each tea. And I actually bought it home because I wanted to try it out, and my wife was super excited because she doesn't like smoking and vaping. But the first thing she said is like, the tea is not good. Because we have our own tea at home. We like doing our own thing. We add our ginger and our lemon and all of that. And why did I need to spend that extra $5? That's not the value that I was looking for. I was looking for cannabis that can be really well absorbed into my beverage at the end of the day. And that's where the value is. So you're asking for $5 more for something I literally don't need. And honestly, I don't have a tea bag that costs $2.50 in my home. So I just think, we're complaining about the industry not accepting the beverages yet, but maybe we just have it wrong. Maybe that's not the solution. Okay, we're telling people buy these beverages, they're trying it, and they're saying, well, it's not all of the value, and I'm paying for something I don't need. And then you're mentioning coffee. I think a lot of people forget that cannabis is not alcohol. You don't consume it only in the evening. I start my day every day with vaping. The first thing I do in the morning probably is vape. So it's something you do around the day. And I need it with coffee in the morning, definitely not as a beer or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we wrap this up, tell me a little bit about what's happened since Canada had their 2.0 launch about 9 months ago, right? So that was the extension of beverages and concentrates. How have sales gone? What have you seen moving? Where's the industry going? What's Canada look like right now with 2.0?
Yeah, I think we've seen a few interesting stuff. If you don't mind, I'll start with a vaping example. We had an awesome intern here in the summer, and we did a lot of tracking of prices. So we used to go like on a weekly basis, collect prices from all the websites and all the data we can. And in the end of the summer, he did for us this nice summary of his findings. And one of his findings was around market share for different products in the vaping. And I don't remember the numbers here, but essentially there were about 5 groups. There was doses, there were packs, there were 510s, and then there were a bunch of small, disposables. And he was presenting that with the percentage. And I just told him, like, listen, this is the data, right? But I see something else. I see packs as the first mover advantage of our ecosystem, and nobody able to complete with them. Like the other ones are less than 1%, or they shouldn't even be in the graph, right? And packs held, I think, like 20% of the Canadian market from vapes.
Wow.
So you definitely want to be the first mover when you're building an ecosystem. The second one doesn't count. Those with their amazing marketing machine, they control a big part of the market, almost as big as packs, I think. And I think they're changed right now. They're moving from disposable to kind of you buy the battery in the pod. And I think they'll be able to compete because they did such a good work. Then you see the 510s with a huge market, but nobody can really control that. There's no quality assurance as a consumer when you buy it. You don't know if there was anybody else looking on it. And you see all these small guys. And I think it just shows you about the industry that a lot of things we could have known before. There's only place for one ecosystem that did it right in the beginning, and the rest can't really compete. Why even try? And I kind of think we're going to see the same in beverages from that perspective. And that's why I wanted to start with that. And then on the edibles, we're starting to see a lot of beverages. When I speak with the bud tenders, they tell me that beverages are going really well here in Canada. All of them are telling me that they buy the drops, the water drops, because beverages are too expensive. Now, just to compare, water drops are about 400 milligrams for $64, and a regular beverage is around almost $10 for 5 milligrams, give or take. They are saying that consumers are still struggling a bit sometimes because they're not sure they want to commit for a big amount. But when they recur and they come again, that's when they can convert them. So it's very interesting to see that. And I wonder if we're going to continue seeing that, because that obviously plays to our strategy, like what we see as the future. So it's very anecdotal. I don't have data on this, but I talk a lot with the bud tenders, and I find that interesting to see, what they think. I think those are going to be the interesting parts, right? And it's how we can bring the consumers that are not the current consumers, the ones
Would you infer just from your own data that that's a lack of trusted brands? And what's the reason that people aren't going out and trying more or spending more initially?
I think in the vaping world, there's definitely a matter of trust. So for me, at least, I don't know if all the consumers think the same, but I know that when I buy a PAX, no matter which LP in Canada decided to fill that pod, they didn't only need to go through Health Canada. PAX made sure that it stands in their quality. Something that we're learning, and we're doing the same with Voyager. So if any company wants to join us, we're going to make sure that the quality is good. We learn from them, because I know that I don't like buying vapes that are oil. I feel that's too harsh for me. I prefer vaping dry leaf. But if I do, and I always have one, and I have a PAX actually, right? And I think that I really value that quality. They make sure that is there. If all the other consumers think the same as me, I'm not sure to tell you. But again, I just think the learning is, I think Tokyo Smoke wanted to do a competing ecosystem, and it's just not working. And there's nothing bad or wrong with Tokyo Smoke, but it's very difficult to be second to an ecosystem where all the big brands are already taken. As a consumer, what reason do I have to buy a dispenser from Tokyo Smoke that will only operate pods from Tokyo Smoke and not all the big ones that I want, right? Like, I want to be able to buy Organigram, which is an awesome grower, and I have that in packs. I don't have that anywhere else. So I think that you kind of see there's a first mover advantage in this. Great. If not, like, you need to have this really good marketing machine that you see working. And I heard a bunch of things that Dosis did, and just brilliant. I'm taking the hat off. They did a really good job on their marketing here in Canada.
Do you have any insight or any opinion on the flow of capital. It's a very difficult time to raise capital. Do you have any insight as to where it's coming from? I mean, last year it seemed like it was coming out of Canada and multi-state operators were going everywhere. Now it seems like the growth is in the US. But from a capital standpoint, where's it coming
Yeah.
from? And what does it look like? What's the landscape for
So
investors?
yeah, very interesting. So I raised money a while in the cannabis industry because also I worked for another company in the beginning. When I just entered the industry, I fundraised for them, and then I founded Voyager a year and a half ago. So when I raised for the other company, majority of the cash was coming from the US and Canada, and money was really flowing those days. That was the days that companies were just raising in the millions for, I have an idea, boom, here's some money because he said cannabis. When we fundraised last year for Voyager, I don't think that was the case. It was a bit more difficult. I have to say we raised most of our money in Europe, actually. Not in. We met them in events in the US, but like two of our lead investors that gave us a few $100,000 were from Europe, actually. Very interestingly. Right now, when COVID, I have to say it's very difficult. It feels like there's still a lot of money flowing into the big companies. And I'm going to make the assumption that there's a lot of people there that don't want to see these companies completely failing with their initial investment, or if there's money reinvested. Sometimes it feels a bit awkward. We're the new guy, and we haven't failed yet. But these guys that have failed once or twice are still getting substantially more money. Like they're raising $30 million when we're trying to raise only 5. And it's a bit frustrating, but that's the game. For us, I think we have a different challenge. So we're trying to create a new platform for people to use cannabis. And one of our struggles, I would say, is even when we find investors that love what we're doing, they're saying like, we need more traction. We want to see more because we like you as a founder. We like the solution. We believe in it. But how do we see the consumers? So those are things that we need to solve with them. And we are actually, right? We have a few things to solve that. But I think for smaller startups, fundraising is still a bit more difficult and money is not flying in as it has been before. But there's still, there's opportunities. And as you mentioned, we met in one of those pitch events. And I have to say, we met a few investors there and have some good calls out of that. So I do see, money is coming in, but I can't say it's a specific location for companies like us at this stage. Again, last year, definitely Europe.
So with the lockdown and everything, and you can't really go to events, still not sure if MJ BizCon is going to be in Vegas in person or strictly online. How do you make the most out of it? What it looks like maybe 2021 is going to be the same as 2020, where there's not going to be events at least until the spring or summer. How do you, as an entrepreneur and business person, get the most out of this environment?
It's really tough. Anybody who knows me and has seen me in an event knows that I work the crowd. Like, put me in a networking event, I'm going to talk with everybody, find whoever I need. And, I kind of put myself out there, go and talk with people and bring them to a conversation. So the minute it moves online, very difficult. And, if you don't come with a Rolodex of investors, it's a tough one. And I have to say, I think one of the challenges of the industry is that a lot of these events, they don't really pick and choose who's going to come and speak. They ask for $5,000. And, maybe that's the reason that a lot of companies are failing, because they just paid $5,000, they raised money. And, maybe the events are part of the mistake, right? They're charging the listeners to pay them, and they're bringing a commercial. I tell them, you want to talk with me and hear what I'm doing? I'm like, we love what you're doing. You pay us $5,000, you get 10 minutes to pitch. We're avoiding that. We don't play that game as a decision, for good and for bad. We're only willing to go to events that we need to pay $100 and $200 because that's fair for founders and for startups, and that respects us as what we're doing. And we're being chosen for them, right? I find that in these big events, it's very difficult, right? People are coming half power from that perspective. We had some success in the events of meeting people, but it's not networking. So there's no actually networking and things like that. So we're working with more finders, we have a bank that's talking with us and wants to help us fundraise, and all kinds of options like that. And I think for us as Voyager, one thing we're doing right now is we're expanding essentially our search not only for cannabis investors, because at the end of the day for us, we're really a hardware company. So there's no reason I won't go to a VC that invests in medical equipment. And I think that's an advice that a lot of other companies maybe should do, because in my opinion, if you're in the cannabis industry, most chances today as a startup that you're not a grower. So if you're a tech or you're a service, and you can apply for other things. Maybe you need to look for money also outside of cannabis, just to kind of expand your circle.
Yeah, I haven't gone to cannabis events for the last, maybe 7 years. I won't even pay to go and listen to anybody anymore. I find it very frustrating when you want to listen to a panel and it's a pay to play system. The panel isn't really there to enlighten or to give you any information. They're really there just to publicize themselves. And so, being a finance podcast, or at least looking through the lens of finance on the podcast, we can see that there's a lot of people who will talk about friends and family loans, or, the secrets of financing is a credit card advance or a home equity line of credit or a convertible note. You're like, wow, this is circa 2015. And that's the pay to play. And you can see that. And there's a lot of these big, companies, conventions that do it. And it's unfortunate because I think there's a lot of individuals that would have a lot more a lot more interesting things to say than the ones that just pay for it.
I mean, look, I'm not saying I may be wrong in everything I said today. It could be. I think I'm absolutely right. But I think I'm one of the only people that is calling out the cannabis beverage industry and saying, look, there's another way to do this. Mm-hmm. I think I can add value on any panel I go. But the fact is that any panel I go and I say this, they tell me, you're right, but you need to pay us a few $1,000s. And that's frustrating. So again, at the end of the day, it's not all of the events, but majority of them. And then you have a few like yourself, for example, who are saying, wait, this is interesting. Let's bring it to the audience. Let's let them decide. So that bias is I think, doing a lot of, challenges. But again, money is coming in. It's always a difficult process. I have to say my personal experience with fundraising is when I did it as a job, I loved it. I like doing sales. It's fun. I had, every day a reason to wake up, open my list and go fundraise. As a CEO, I'm supporting my company with fundraising. I want to be developing the product. I want to be doing the business meetings with our partners. There's so many things I need to do that are not fundraising that I feel like I'm, wasting my time on fundraising, which is, at the end of the day, is a supporting activity. This business does not exist to fundraise. It exists to put product on the market and make consumers happy, right? And I think also, some of the cannabis companies sometimes forget that, right? Like they just try to fundraise. And we're trying to do it different. We pay very low salaries for ourselves. When we did go to events before of COVID, we slept in a hostel, we shared a room, we did everything to save the money we can. So just that's our approach. Hope that it pays off in the long run. From a development perspective, and that may interest you as well, we have a working product, right? We measured it at a lab. It's accurate. It's great. What we're doing right now, which is very interesting, is two things. One is we're converting our design we're designing a mold essentially. So right now when we're 3D printing it, we pay a lot of money per pod. That's not how it's supposed to be. Pods are supposed to be really low cost. The minute we have the mold ready, $50 per plastic, not including the proprietary pump that we have inside. And then on the dispenser itself, I'll show you an opened one. If I'll put it in front of myself, like it's called 2 layers right now, which means that we didn't really do a lot of work to make it small yet. We just wanted it to work. So we're working now with a company to make it 4 or 6 layers, really shrink it, and that will essentially make the product even smaller, something that we get a lot of people asking us about. And then usually what I do is I present to them a bottle of 30 ml and explain that liquid is not, you can't compress liquid, right? You can flatten it, you can't compress it. So there's a size that there's always going to be. 30 ml takes 30 ml, but we can shrink the dispenser, and that's something we're working on. And we're aiming to have a sensory test by the end of the year. And that sensory test will happen with one of the cannabis companies here in Canada. We'll do that sensory testing and then get prepared with them for shoppers, hopefully, and be ready with our product for first quarter. That's the goal right now.
That's great. So you're going to have some product available for the Canadian marketplace first quarter 2021. What about the US?
So we've been asked a lot about that. And to be honest, a lot of times we tell ourselves, like, maybe it is smarter to go and start in the US. There's a lot of advantages, less regulation, there's more marketing and advertising. The challenge is it's very difficult to start a business remotely. I need to be there. I can't really go to the States right now. I can't fly back and forward, both because cannabis can be a bit difficult in the border and then with COVID. And we see our business from that perspective as we're building an ecosystem where we push the dispensers and then companies purchase the pods and put the pods in the industry. we're starting our own brand in Canada to get the party going. But the main value comes from the big brands that you and all the listeners know, right? If you like buying Tweed, I don't have their brand recognition, or I don't have the same brand recognition again as Dosis, as Organigram, or all of those guys. So we really want to have that. But after we did that and improved our model here, I can almost like a franchisee now move to the States. And now I can go to California, find a partner that can manage my ecosystem. I don't need the Voyager pods anymore. Companies will join because they know it's a success story. And now I can start in any jurisdiction, opening that ecosystem. One partner managing the dispensers for us, and we can just sell the pods there. So we really believe we have to prove that, first of all, the business works, and we need to do it close. So we're doing both our manufacturing in Canada at this stage because we can't fly back and forth to China. So we're doing both the manufacturing of the plastic, the assembly, and all the PCB here in Canada at this stage. And we're doing our first go-to-market here in Canada. And once we prove it, we can very simply expand. We have IP on this, so we submitted provisional patents. They're not provisional anymore, sorry, they're non-provisional at this stage. We submitted them in the States. We already extended it to Europe and to Canada, so we're fairly comfortable. And we always say we believe we're going to win these markets on execution. The patent is for when we go medical.
That's great. If people have any questions or they want to look at it, invest in it, buy it, whatever, where can people get some more information? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So we are fundraising, if I'm allowed to say that on your show.
Yep.
And we're happy to talk with accredited investors. You can simply reach out to me. My email is Elad, E-L-A-D, @voyagerproducts.ca. I believe that on our website you can go to info. We'll read that also. Or through LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, Elad Barak. Feel free to reach out, and happy to talk and share more information.
I want to thank my guest, Elad Barak. He is CEO of Voyager. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It was really fun. Thanks.
I appreciate it. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.